we are here to bring you everything and anything surrounding Porsche. I'm Mike.
I'm Aaron.
And this is P-Car Talk. Welcome to another episode of P-Car Talk. I'm Mike.
And I'm Aaron.
We are on location at Alegra Motorsports. We have Carlos and Scooter. Thank you guys for coming on. Thank you for having us today and taking some time out of your schedule. We really appreciate it.
No, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. You got a wonderful facility here. You're a great race team, and we're honored to be here. Like we're
really
in the
cool.
same town, so I guess that's great for us. We're in Tampa. You guys are in Tampa, so it's convenient. I'm glad we got together, and I think we'll bring Tony on later on the show, and him connecting all of us at the 992 launch. I think that was a really good facilitation on his part. Tony's good at that kind of stuff. But yeah, just want to kind of talk about your history, Carlos, because you're an interesting guy. Like, what is it, the Dos Equis commercial? Like, most interesting man. I know, it's like, that's true. No, but in all seriousness, I just think it's a pretty interesting story, as far as, like when you're going to college and then you got into racing. And like we talked a little bit offline how you saw somebody driving a 935 and it kind of struck a chord with you when you were young and kind of inspired you. Can you tell us a little bit about that story of how you got into motorsport and why it really resonated with you?
Well, I was born in Gainesville, Florida, and from there we moved to Indianapolis soon after I was born. So I think my first introduction to racing was at the Indianapolis 500, going to the practice tests, and then, 3 years after that we moved to Tampa, and it was traditional for us to watch the Indy 500, and that was ingrained in us.
Yeah.
So living in Tampa, there were very well-known sport car racers, Charles Mendez and Dave White. Charles Mendez used to live in my neighborhood and had a 935 that he raced.
That's
and
awesome.
had it over at his place. And I used to see that car, and it blew me away. And so from there I went to college and went to Emory University up in Atlanta. And I had a friend that they were going to go do DE, driver's ed, with the Porsche Club, and invited me to come out. And I was gung-ho. I was like, let's do this.
All right.
So I got my first experience at Road Atlanta, and after I did that, I was hooked.
Yeah.
I mean, big time.
Got bit hard, huh?
Bit hard, big time. So from there, I went to, where did I go first? I went to Bondurant and did a driving school there, and then from there I went some more schools. I did at Skip Barber out of Sebring, and that's where, basically learned the basics there.
Exactly, right.
And
Race car 101.
Yeah. And then my first real experience was a 944 that I still have here that I had purchased. I traded a car that I had and started doing Porsche Club racing.
Nice.
First race was here at Sebring, and we did a couple of club races with that car. And then from there, jumped into Ferrari Challenge.
Okay.
Did a year of Ferrari Challenge, which was really interesting. People didn't care, whether they crashed the cars or not.
Yeah.
Just all out.
Yeah, I didn't have the budget.
Exactly. You're like, I care.
I don't hit my fender.
Exactly.
But it was a lot of fun, and it was good competitive racing. And then from there, I think that's where Scooter steps in. And I met Scooter.
You were doing some GS stuff.
Yeah,
then
with Dave White, I did a couple of races, but then
the BMW.
And the BMW.
Yeah, that as well.
No, actually, the 968.
I didn't even know about that.
Yeah, Dave White had that 968 that we used to race in Firehawk, or what was it then, Toyo? Or
Speed Vision. Yeah.
Speed Vision, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I bought my first RSR, I think 1997 it was. And soon after that, I met Scooter over at Dave White's shop, and we got to know each other really well from there. And invited him to come over and work with me on a race car, and it was that race car.
That same 944.
The 944.
Well, no, prior to that, it was the RSR, wasn't it?
No, we raced the 944. We did the Moroso 24-hour in that.
That's right.
And then we
That's
did,
right.
Then we did Sebring.
It's been a long
Nice.
time, so.
Hey, you got a lot of race stories. That's good, though.
But eventually we did.
He's like, has it been that long?
It doesn't seem like it, but yeah, you see old pictures and you're like, oh.
But yeah, no, eventually we ran that RSR and had a lot of fun doing that, and that's all she wrote from there.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then, I guess that was the catalyst, huh? But Alegra started right around 96, is that about right?
96, correct.
Yeah, so it's like one of those things, it's like, all right, let's do this.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It wasn't. It was nothing like where we're sitting now. So it was a little shop what was that shop? About 3,000, 4,000.
What do you mean? It wasn't always this like firepower.
Always like that's one of my favorite things about Carlos. I'm a very neat and clean guy, and his shops were always very neat and clean, and very well lit and organized and all that. But yeah, we were.
Air conditioned.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal in South Florida. Very big deal. Many people that listen to us are all over the world. They don't get that's like we joke around about having AC in the cars, but that you need that stuff.
You definitely need it.
Well, in shops, and like no joke, that was the first place I've ever worked in my life that was air conditioned. Yeah, because when you work in shops, like
you thought you'd hit pay dirt at that time, huh? You're like,
it was just
where's
weird.
this place been?
But when the weather's nice, I'd have the doors open, and he would freak out. Don't open the doors. Don't open the doors. But yeah, we had
trying to show people our business. What's wrong with you, boy?
We had a truck and a dually and about a 30-foot trailer, and that was it.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't quite.
We did everything
like
ourselves.
this.
I mean, we did all the work ourselves.
Yeah.
So.
When
See,
he said
kids?
we, that he means me.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
He was there in spirit.
Nobody blows up overnight. That was 24 plus years ago, and humble beginnings. Like that's how things start. You have to grind it away, right? It doesn't just okay, great.
Well, the beauty is prior to Scooter, I used to travel with that 944 to all the club races, so I'd pull it behind my Bronco and just go to the club races and do everything. And,
that's awesome.
But then Scooter came along. I was like,
good, I got this guy to work on the car. I'll be at home if you need anything. Bring her off.
Exactly. See that Carlos was being real smart there at the time. He's like, okay,
delegation here.
I need another driver if I'm gonna do an endurance race anyway. So why will not pick a guy who's organized like me, but is also a wrench?
He's a wrench and he drives.
Yeah,
and he's quick.
Yeah, enter Scooter.
Yes.
So it's like very intelligent move right there, right? So so you guys have a lot of history with some of those, a lot of that racing and all that 24 hours and endurance racing and things like that. I know we made light of it, but I mean, of course we can talk about it. It's not that big of a deal. I know you're a BMW guy at heart. And
I'm really not. I mean, I've said this to a lot of people. I'm just a car guy. I just like cars.
That's a good point.
You've seen my cars. Like I've got all different kinds of stuff, and I like to race, whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think most people are in general anyways, people try to classify themselves, well, I'm just a Porsche guy. I think if you like motorsport, you pretty much like everything.
He is a Porsche guy through and through. He really is. Now, he's had other stuff and whatever, but those cars come and go. He's a Porsche guy.
He's married to Porsche.
Yeah, and I respect that. I mean, there's people like that. I just like cars, but Porsche isn't. Them and Ferrari, I think, are in their own category because they're the benchmark car. So whatever else you're racing, I've raced Mustangs and BMWs and all that. That's the car. Like that's the manufacturer. If you're in sports car racing, you're trying to beat Porsche because they are the best. Yeah,
that's who you're chasing around the track normally.
Yeah, and if you're in a championship, back to BMW, if you won that championship and Porsche wasn't in the mix, no big deal. But if you beat Porsche,
it's a big
that's
deal.
A big deal. Yeah, that's an accomplishment, and that's why I love Porsche. I mean, they are good. They are the benchmark.
They're the ones with the target on the back all the time, right?
Sure, exactly. and that continues to be true.
Yeah. Very good point. So let's segue into fast forward a little bit into 2007. 24-hour win for Alegra Motorsports at Daytona. The awesome story that Scooter's told me offline many times. But I don't want to tell it through with the stories you told me since you two lived it. Whoever goes first, I think it's just interesting. I'll lead with how the race started. I heard that basically Scooter just went balls out and was gonna we're going hard right out the gate.
That was in 2007 and 2008.
so now you take it and run with it. That's how we're gonna lead with that.
Oh boy, that race, and I think anybody that's won that race could probably say the same thing. I mean, you could do a multi-part podcast just on that race. I mean, there's so much that happened with that, but. The highlights reel from my end of that. I at that point had been racing with Carlos for off and on for 8 years. I started racing with him in '98 and a little at the end of '98, and now we're in 2007. So maybe we're closer to 10 years, but whatever. And that was the first time that he had purchased a new car. We'd always had, when we had the 993, that was a couple years old when we ran it, and we did well with that car, but we were never really in contention to win. Later, he had an E46 BMW that was a couple-year-old car, And we had some highlights in that car.
Yeah.
It showed some promise, but again, we were a long shot to get that car on the podium.
Yeah.
This car was a brand new car. And I had just opened my restaurant, and I was getting away from racing just to focus on that business. And he was gung-ho to do this Daytona thing, and he was calling me. He was in Miami at the time, and he said, we're doing this thing. I'm all in. Whatever it takes to do this thing as well as it can be done, I'm committed to do it. And he had bought the car, which was really exciting.
No, absolutely.
And
brand new race car.
Yeah.
That's always fun.
But then Porsche came out just slightly after he bought that car with a better car specific for that series that fit the rules exactly. And so now there was going to be an update to this car, which he committed to get. And then that's where the story can get long, so we'll just kind of skip over that part. But as we ran the car to the rules in Grand Am, the car was nothing short of terrifying to drive. It was just
Nothing
impossible.
like you'd experienced before, huh?
No, and so it was myself, a very successful Canadian guy, Carlos, and a Porsche factory guy that was in their development.
It was Mark Bassing.
Okay.
And then JF Dumoulin.
Okay.
With
Yeah.
us, so.
All really good guys, and Mark especially was our connection to the factory, and we thought that we would
good
get,
group of fast guys, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so we thought we were going to have all the right stuff, and then some insight from Mark and the connection to Porsche, and we just could not figure out what this car was doing. And we did 2 different test weekends. We were making no progress. The guys with the Grand Am specific cars were significantly faster than we were. And so anyway, long story short, we figured out what was wrong with the car literally when it was time to go qualify it.
Wow.
And we...
Better late than never.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'd
Completely.
actually asked Carlos. I told him I thought it was a really good idea to withdraw the car. That I did not think that car was going to run 24 hours, especially knowing it was probably going to rain.
Yeah.
We were going to wreck that car.
It
Something was gonna
always
happen
rains
to
at the 24.
It always
right?
rains. At the
It
24.
always rains.
And it's almost always cold too.
Yeah.
You can bank on those 2 things. So, and he was just all in. We were just going to do it, and but we figured out what was wrong with the car. We corrected it, and that basically meant that we were starting the race in an untested car. With just factory alignment specs. Just put the shocks in the middle of all the adjustments and go. And I qualified the car about a second off of the pole. And at the start of the race, we started the race on brand new brakes, which is something I had objected to on the grid. We were on the grid. It was myself and the Brembo guy talking to the guy that was running the team, who was also a Canadian guy, and saying we should start from the back. You do not start a race on brand new brakes. And it was a brake manufacturer I had never worked with before. I was really familiar with performance friction. These were a Paget brake, and they assured me that it would be fine. And it wasn't. I think it was about the 3rd lap we're going into turn 1.
It wasn't.
And there was just nobody
Nothing
home on
there.
the brake pedal for about the first 100 yards. And by the time
no.
that there was grip, I was just out of room to get the car slowed down, and that was the end of that. And I backed the car into the tire wall. And we
Carlos
came in.
is like, my brand new car.
Everybody was really pissed, and I don't blame them. And that's not the kind of thing, where I'm going to say to the guy that was kind of our running the show, really, that I thought that he'd made a tactical error there. They thought that I had made an error in driving. You just let, it's time to race.
Yeah.
So
Just
you
gotta
don't,
let
you
it
don't
go.
start arguing and fighting with people.
Exactly.
It was
just
at the
let it go.
start. It's the 24-hour
Yeah.
race.
Exactly.
He recovered quickly. So
Exactly.
So I
It
think-
already happened. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So we were about a
Yeah.
lap down there. I think we lost another lap. I think Carlos had an off at the bus stop. But anyway, there's the pictures in the middle of the race. The car looks like it's been on a demolition derby. It's missing bodywork here and there
That
and
was
whatever.
Mark Bassing.
Okay, well, whatever. So
He's like, that wasn't me.
yeah. Well, I'll always remember my mistakes, and whoever else made mistakes. But the point is that what was really neat about that race, and it's like a bad movie. We were nowhere in that race. We were multiple laps down. I think at one point we were 4 or 5 laps down, and we just kept coming back, and all the other teams started running into problems, big problems, and cars were breaking. They were having pit stop issues and this and that, and we just kept going up and up and up. And that car we led like the last 40 minutes of the race, and that was it.
Yeah.
And crazy enough, 10 years later, his story is the same.
Yeah.
It's unreal.
I think we won that race in front of the Pontiac by 6 seconds.
Yeah,
or
it was a
something,
very close race at the
close.
end.
I remember you
And that
saying
was a
that.
factory Pontiac team. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. I remember you were saying that too. You're like, we even to the very, very end,
and
it was like
because-
we weren't sure.
And those
Yeah.
guys made a mistake.
Yeah.
They actually, in their last pit stop, they sped in pit lane, and they had a drive-through penalty. And were it not for that drive-through penalty, they'd have beat us.
Okay.
Our car was overheating bad.
But that's what caused the other Porsches to fall out, because they were building, give so much buildup on their front air dam that they didn't clean it out.
Yeah.
And it just all overheated.
So it was just all the tractor rain stuff. Yeah, it's getting all ate up on there and like gummed up, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was just such an unlikely scenario. But that's how those races, that's how they go typically.
Well, yeah, because it's such a long race, right?
Yep.
Like anything. When
Yeah.
I was talking to Tony, and like obviously I'm not a race car driver, but I watch a lot of racing, and one of the and any of those endurance races, and you guys experience it because you guys are drivers, and you know how it is. It's not how you start; it's how you finish those races.
Exactly.
And you can lead the whole time. If your car grenades in hour 23, who cares?
Right.
But there's I think from an entire team perspective, the pit crew, the drivers, all of it, if you're leading or if you're in the top 3 or 5 or whatever, the pressure on you typically forces a mistake throughout the race because you're just under the gun. You feel like you're right there.
Something
And we
eventually
weren't.
cracks, right?
We were back there, so we're just trucking, right? Like we're just kind of running our own race. And not that everybody wasn't doing the best that they could do, but you didn't have that piercing pressure of like, man, if this pit stop doesn't go perfect, we're going to lose a place to this guy. We just kind of did our own thing.
Yeah,
But
that's
it
a good.
also rained, as I recall.
Oh,
and
God,
we
yeah, it
caught
rained
a
off
bunch of
and
laps in
on
the
and-
rain.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were just really good in the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was actually a fortunate part of us running that car in pretty stock configuration is that it was decent in the dry. Like I said, it qualified pretty good. But in the rain, we were, if I remember right, when I was out in that car in the rain, we were the quickest car in the rain.
We were.
That car was really fast because it was soft.
Yeah.
It was really compliant, and it just was a rocket in the rain. And we did well.
Yeah.
We'd make up
That's
places
Make up a
we
in
lot
the
of
rain.
times.
Yeah.
Make
we
up
got
a
our
lot.
laps back.
Yeah.
then. So,
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, and that especially as
And a
you guys-
Porsche's good in the rain anyway.
Yeah, and then it always rains in Daytona, so
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you got to bank
Yeah.
for that
Counting on it.
always.
Yeah.
So nice. I thank you for sharing that story. I just think
That's
it's always like interesting to hear that like the
perspective.
car is brand new and then instantly like do damage to it. It's like, yeah, well, here we are. That's part of it.
broken
Like,
in
go
now.
figure it out.
Well, if the very first lap that car ever turned, it was a brand spanking new car. I left the pit and went out and around, and the first trip through the bus stop, you just bounce it, across the curb. The same way you always go, the windshield broke. So that should have been a sign of things to come.
Red flag.
Exactly. It's like great.
Yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, the car was 2 miles old and the windshield broke.
Nice. And then another great win at 24-hour Daytona, right? In 2017.
Yeah, that was just unbelievable. The first time we won, to me, it was huge because it was Daytona.
Yeah.
Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona, and it was all the stories I've heard from Dave White and all these winners that have won it, and such a prestigious race to win, and to actually get a Rolex.
Yeah, exactly.
To have the Daytona winning Rolex was huge. So we got through that, and we did a couple of stints or a couple of years with the Daytona prototype, ran that, and then did that up to 2012, and then 2013 we started to go ahead and run Porsche Cup, IMSA Cup.
Okay.
And we did it up in Canada, and we did it up there for a couple of years. And my son was starting to get of age where, at age 15 he ran IMSA Cup up in Canada.
Oh, wow.
And then age 16 he won the championship. So when they won the championship, the last race was at Road Atlanta in 2016, and I had already made the decision to buy the 2017 GT3R.
Okay.
And so I figured I was going to go ahead and put my son in the car. And for sure I had Daniel Morad, who was our pro driver, driving with us also in the IMSA Cup. He won the championship also. And it was at that point where we were at the dinner, the ceremony dinner for the awards banquet. And I decided, you know what, let me go ahead. It would be really cool to get my son Michael to drive with us, to get Daniel to drive with me, both IMSA Cup champions, and then the U.S. Cup champion. And I went ahead and did a presentation, asked everyone to come up on stage, and said, you know, great job on your championship win, and I'd like to go ahead and invite all three of you guys to drive with me at the 24 Hours of Daytona.
Nice.
And so they were blown away. So we did everything to get ready for it. You know, we got the car prepared, we got all the spares that we needed, and, you know, did all the testing. And it was just an amazing effort. I mean, I still think about it today. I'm like blown away.
Well, it's insane. I mean, it's a huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and it was cool because, you know, we had Michael Christensen drive with us that year, factory Porsche driver, and, you know, all the testing was, you know, looking really good. So when we went to the race, we just went out there and did our job. I mean, each kid that jumped into the car went out there, they drove quick, and brought the car back in one piece, and little bit by little bit we started to get to the front. And by the next morning we're leading. It was funny because the Ferrari was catching us, and literally, like, when it was a couple of car lengths away on the banking, the motor let go on the Ferrari.
Yeah, that's what Tony was saying.
That car was so fast, and I was like, "It's going to catch us for sure." I mean, we're not going to do well with this car.
Yeah.
So, but
and then the reliability kicked in.
And then we see poof, big black smoke go out, and the car slowed down. We're like, "No way!" You know, we're like blown away.
See ya.
And that's all she wrote. I mean, our team did a phenomenal job. Tony and the guys did a phenomenal job on the last pit stop, where we beat the Audi out of the pits, and it was literally parked right behind us.
Yeah.
And so the Audi pitted first. We pitted right next to them at the same time, and the guys nailed the pit stop. We take off as the Audi's trying to take off. And we bit them out of the pits and led the race to the end.
And that was the difference, right?
Oh, yeah. And so, I mean,
in those races, isn't that crazy to think about, too? Like, you race for 24 hours, and it comes down to something like that.
Oh, yeah.
One of the pit stops between P1 and P2.
Yeah.
That's how close you guys are running. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Well, the kids did a great job. I remember one time it was like 2 o'clock in the morning or something like that, and one of the drivers, Jesse Lazar, was, you know, he did a great job up to then, and it was his turn to get back in the car, and it was raining, and he did not want to get in. He was just so scared, and his main fear was, I don't want to hurt the car.
Yeah.
And I go, listen, we did this as a team, okay? You got to finish your stint because there's minimum drive time.
Exactly,
for each
right?
driver.
Yeah, you have to get in the car.
You have to get in the car. And I go, listen, at the end of the day, just do your very best. If you crash, which I hope you don't crash, but if you crash, it is what it is. It's part of the racing.
Exactly.
So I'm not going to hold this over you. Just go out there and do your thing.
By the way, he never ever gave me that pep talk.
That's funny.
That's the one bummer, being friends with him, right? Like, you guys are too close, where it's like, look,
we live
you
in the
crash
same
that,
town,
I'm going to
so-
kick your ass. I'm going to kick your ass. You crash.
You're going to come here and mop
And
this place
anybody
for the
who
rest of your life.
crashes, you better not crash. It's like, why do I get the gauntlet thrown on me?
Well, Scooter had a lot of experience by then. He was just, you know, a fresh driver and getting all the experience. But, man, he got in the car and did a phenomenal job. And Mark got in the car and really pulled through in the rain. And Daniel Murad did an outstanding job. I mean, they were really top-level driver. They were up there with the best.
Nice.
And running strong. So just a phenomenal effort. When we crossed that checkered flag, I was like, I can't believe this. It was the 10-year anniversary from
I know,
the
right?
2007
Isn't that
win.
crazy? It's like it was meant to be, right?
Oh, I mean, winning it with my son,
Yeah.
you know, father and son team, unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like a story. You can't even paint a picture better than that, really.
No, it was just, I don't know. I mean, I still think about it, and it's yeah.
Yeah, it's a hell of an accomplishment. It's amazing. It's such a great story too. It's just one of those things. Thank you for sharing that. Just because I can't imagine what that must be like for you, just to be like, hey, guess what? We did this 10 years ago, but this time we did it with my son here, and this is really cool. So,
but it really comes down to, I mean, you got to make sure you got to do everything right. You know, you got to buy the right manufacturer car. You know, which for me it's Porsche, because Porsche has the reliability. You know, they're there at the racetrack supporting you 100%. You know, whatever you need, you'll get it there. technical assistance. They're there for everything, and they really want to see Porsche customers do well.
Yeah.
So, and
it makes sense for the brand, right?
Well,
like it's like we don't want you to go out there and like do crappy,
right?
right?
I mean, they are the first to do customer racing.
Mm-hmm.
Now you see all these other manufacturers out there doing customer racing, but Porsche was the one that pioneered the concept, and they're really good at it. And so the manufacturer, you got to make sure you have all the spares there ready to go. The right crew. The crew is practicing really hard. They're practicing constantly the pit stops and
staying alert and ready to go too. That's got to be a big one too.
It's everything. I mean, everyone's got to be in shape, and I trained so. It was funny. I trained so hard. We were talking about my back surgery 2 years ago. I trained so hard where I had herniated disc already.
Wow.
And I started including running in my workout, and I had worked out so hard and ran like every day on the treadmill or out on the road, and got to the point where I was bone to bone. Like I
just nothing
blew
left.
away my disc. So,
wow.
So recovered from that finally, but I really worked hard to really get into shape for that race, and it really demands a lot out of you as a driver.
Well, I mean, it's brutal, isn't it? Being in the car and then being alert. And I was going to segue into, since you are both race car drivers, and we don't have a lot of race car drivers on the show that often. Can you share some of what are you going through at 2:00 in the morning when you've already been out there, or 3:00 if that's your stint? What are you doing to stay alert to make sure that you're not just getting kind of malaised and like
not sleeping out there?
Like sleeping awake. I mean,
you're running on pure adrenaline.
Yeah.
It's pure adrenaline.
You're
there's never a moment.
No.
Okay.
I think it's honestly,
you might take a cat nap.
I think it's harder on the crew, because for the driver, you're in the car. Even if you only do a single stint, you're probably in the car for an hour. But a lot of times at night, you're going to double or triple stint the car. So you're in for 2 or 3 hours, and you're just kind of rolling on adrenaline. And Daytona is not a terribly tough place on you. I think Sebring's a lot worse. It's bumpier, and visibility at Sebring's a lot worse.
I was going to say that at night.
Also during the day, it's a lot harder than at night. So when Scooter said taking a double stint or a triple stint, nighttime is no big deal.
Okay.
I mean, to me,
in the rain, the rain will mentally wear you out.
Okay.
It's rain.
Just getting beat down by the rain and just constantly visibility's low.
Exactly.
And
nothing's, in the dry, the car it moves around a little bit, you give it a little corrections or whatever. In the rain, nothing small happens. If the car breaks loose, it's big, and you gotta be on it and catch it right away, or you're gonna wreck it. So the rain will mentally just kind of wear you down a little more, but physically it's not too bad. But I always feel bad for the crew guys, because I used to crew that race. And you're just sitting there, you're freezing, you're trying to stay awake.
Yeah. They can't leave. They have to stay there.
And
the whole
there's
time.
no relief crew, right?
Yeah.
So at least the driver can go
them.
and rest and whatever.
You are.
And so, then the car comes in, and there's this, minute of chaos. And then the car leaves again. It doesn't come back for an hour.
Yeah.
But you got to stay awake, and you got to stay
Be alert.
Well, the car could have an issue with the tire blowout, where they got to bring it in. So it could be 30 minutes later, and
that's true.
Next thing you know, they're hustling to get everything ready.
Yeah, it's really tough on those guys. And like you just said before, like those races come down. The year we won was 6 seconds. 10 years later when they won, it was really close.
Yeah,
that race usually comes down.
Yeah, and if you got a guy sleeping in the pits and it's kind of misses something, and even if it's only fractions of a second, that could be the difference.
Yeah.
Sure.
Exactly.
And for everybody that's won that race, there's a whole bunch of guys behind them that are looking at that race, looking at, okay, where did we lose those 6 seconds over 24 hours? And you can find it in a million places.
Yeah.
And that's so frustrating for them. And that's why, like his crew, to pull that last pit stop off. I watched that race on TV, and they were a lap down for most of the race. I was just about to leave my house and go somewhere, and they got back on the lead lap. And I'm
You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stay and watch this. There are like 40 minutes to go. They're back on the lead lap, and they're just going, and all of a sudden they're in the lead of the race, and I'm thinking, I'm just having a weird dream, because this is such a great story. And but yeah, the same thing. It was such a tight margin, and his crew nailed it. 23 hours. And that's 23 hours into the race. Those guys haven't slept for 30-odd hours.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And that's a miss for the listeners out there. It's not like it's just that. I mean, they're awake all the prep to get that. the walk and all this, the grid walk and all the car prep and all that. That doesn't just, stuff's not just ready and you show up and start racing.
Well, no, they get up probably like around 5:30 Saturday morning. They take off to the track, start, have breakfast, take off for the track. And then, they're up all day and then all through the next day till midnight on Sunday.
And then they're rewarded with loading the trailer.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end,
We're done.
Yeah.
The cleanup.
Either they're soaking wet loading the trailer, or they're sweaty and just tired if I'm loading the trailer. And that's what they get to do, right?
And that's why I say, everything needs to come together. And then when all that comes together, on top of that is a lot of luck. Okay, because it does take a lot of luck. I've seen, front runners, that are meant to win the race that are taken out or something, breaks and
internal combustion failure or something, and it's
Exactly.
just you can't plan for that. Something just lets go, and you're like, all right, our day's over.
That's it. So
We were lead lap for 14 hours, and now we're done. And it's like, oh, how does that happen? So let's transition a little bit about, obviously, race car driver. Obviously has a addiction for Porsche and things like that. What are some of your favorite cars? We won't go through all of the ones in your current collection. Are more of the race cars your favorite cars, or some of the road cars your favorite cars? Or if you had to pick,
they're all my
to be fair, I'll let you pick one road car and one race car, so that way I can say,
that's so hard.
I know, but I mean, you got a lot of beautiful stuff here. Just something that really resonates with you, and something you're like, if the building was on fire and I could only save 2 cars, what would I save, basically?
I'd save all of them.
You're like, I would just go down with the fire. I'd just go down with the building at that point.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, I love road cars because, just you look at the lines, like you look at the 904 and just the design of that car, or the 356 Speedster, just beautiful, beautiful car. And then you look at the more current cars. You look at this 959S that I've got right here, and
beautiful.
To me, I love that car. That's, I think, one of my favorites to drive. It's more understated. People see that car, they don't know what it is, which I love. You drive a Carrera GT, people are
looking,
almost driving, and you're trying to take a picture of the
They're
car.
like, I know that's something different. What is that?
Exactly. But so just the driving experience, just going out and driving these cars on the road, it's just kind of hard to drive in Tampa with all the traffic.
Exactly.
And last thing you want, someone running into you with these cars. But when you could take off, and Scooter and I have done some pretty cool events where we'll take off and go, Central Florida somewhere, and do these events where we take the vintage cars out, and we have fun with that. But for the race cars, it's, every car is so different. So to say that, which one's your favorite race car, I can't, because they're all so different.
They offer something so different.
Exactly. I said earlier that I, grew up watching Indianapolis. So we just picked up a couple of Indy cars that Scooter and I did the Indy 500 this year, the historic event there. And we drove the Porsche. I've got a 1990 Porsche Indy car here. And then, we drove the Penske there too. It's
That's
a 1990
awesome.
Penske car.
That's cool.
And I think we're pretty blown away, that first experience of getting on the track at the Indy 500. I mean, it was just mind-boggling cool.
Well, open wheel car too probably changes your perspective
so insane.
It
was so
immensely.
much fun.
But just to be in one of those cars at that track.
Yeah, at
how many
such a
people-
historic place, right?
Yeah.
It's so much race history, so much stuff. It's just kind of probably overwhelming, honestly, to kind of just be like,
Well, for
what's
all the
happening
people
right now?
Exactly.
that I know, and probably for all of my racing friends and people, I don't know anybody that's driven an Indy car around the Indy track. That's a rare
That's a
opportunity.
good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
That's
how
a
many
good
people
point.
have driven a Porsche Indy car?
Yeah, that's
Good
Well,
point.
you still haven't. You're gonna do it next year.
Yeah,
Full
I let
disclosure,
Scooter drive
I
the
fit
Porsche.
in the Porsche.
Exactly.
I didn't fit so well, so I drove the Penske. I fit well in that car. And actually, we drove also this Eagle that we have here. It's a 1972 Eagle.
Yeah.
That car's a beast.
And that car,
Yeah.
actually, there was a crash on
And
track.
these are methanol cars, right?
Yeah, they run on methanol.
So you got to watch your Ricky Bobby on fire, right?
Well,
'Cause
That's
no one's going to know
the
you're
turbo,
on fire.
The turbo and the Eagle lit.
Well, let's
That's shut down.
explain.
Yeah.
I mean, prior to that, we were coming around a turn, and it's an exhibition event. It's not meant to go balls out, as hard as you can. And a guy in a 68 Eagle was coming around the turn and just put his foot down and lost control of the car and hit the wall. He got hurt pretty bad, actually.
Yikes.
And when we were coming around the turn, we saw a lot of cars slowing down, so we slowed down. We had to slow down pretty quickly when we saw
You did,
that.
yeah. I was back.
And as we let off and we slowed down, it just shot out a bunch of methanol. And when I stopped, apparently there was a fire in the tailpipe, and it caught onto the wing.
Oh no!
And next thing I know, people telling me, "You're on fire." They're pointing at me, and I'm like, well, "What am I going to do?" You know?
Yeah.
You can't see it.
That's the crazy thing. Yeah, that's why I said like
you can see
it's
the
like,
heat waves coming
exactly,
off of it.
But it's one of those flameless fires. So
Exactly.
It's
So
you're like,
I just drove around all of it and drove
Yeah.
it. You know.
yeah, so they put it out pretty quickly, and it just
Scooters
burns the bottom
waving.
side.
You pointing back at him. Yeah, man. Yeah.
But driving everything from the Daytona winning car from 2007 to the Daytona prototype that we raced in 2016. I mean, they're
just
all
because of the history.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so,
they're
it's-
just fun cars.
Do you guys find it, and we can't relate, but I'd like to ask you guys this question since you're race car drivers. Does normal street driving really just seem nothing to you because you guys have so many hours on the track? And
Yes.
yes. Thank you for answering honestly. Like, because I have that feeling that you guys must feel that way because you're just like, if I'm not on the racetrack and you're not really pushing, we're just, you feel like a drone probably out on these roads, don't you? Just kind of like floating around.
Will be different in that regard. Like I love the Carrera GT as a car to look at it. I mean, it's an amazing car, and that's those types of cars when manufacturers build them is to show what you can do.
Yeah, like
right?
a show of force.
Yeah, exactly. What a phenomenal car. But, it's not a very practical car. And to me, all my road cars are old, pokey, slow cars.
Yeah.
I like that stuff.
And your VW van is practical.
Well, I wouldn't say it's practical, but and it's tough to get a speeding ticket in it.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you figure if you're going to drive something slow, you might as well drive something fun, right?
Yeah, exactly. So to me to have, like a really sophisticated, fast street car, well, for what? Especially we live in the city and that sort of thing.
I kind of feel that way, and I'm not even a race car driver. I think if you look at things in practicality, not that it's, I mean, if you have the means, it's one thing, but if you see these guys building these like really fast cars that have like a Lamborghini Gallardo with a twin turbo, a 2,500 horsepower road car,
right,
to go race a half-mile event or something like that. And I get that's for that, but they are driving it on the street as well, and it's like, I just shrug my shoulders. I'm kind of like, why?
Yeah.
I don't.
Like
it's
just
not my thing.
go racing.
That's what I always tell. I just told one of the guys in the shop that he was telling me about something he wanted to build, and I just said, just build a race car. Like if you want to go fast. But that
Get
to
it
me
out
is
on
the
the track,
difference.
right?
Like I've ridden in a lot of fast cars. I don't think I've really driven a lot of fast street cars, but it just doesn't compare to a race car. When you have that level of grip, and the whole point of having a fast race car, you driving around on a racetrack by yourself is no fun. Racing people is fun.
Exactly.
And you can't really do that on the street, or you shouldn't.
Exactly.
But that's just not the place for that. And to be outbraking somebody going 150, 160 miles an hour, and go into a corner side by side, that's the fun of racing. And you just don't get that on the street.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I used to always say that, when I was out on the racetrack, if I was out there by myself and let's say after I get out for a pit stop and there's not really any cars in front of me, it was hard for me to really push myself hard. But the moment I had a car right in front of me, it was the hunt. For me, it's always about the hunt and catching them and passing them.
Yeah.
And that's what motivates me is just that, that
that
drive.
makes you go get after it,
Exactly.
basically.
Yeah, testing's not super fun.
I was gonna say that probably isn't the best out there when you go spend come back in, tell us what's going on with the car, and you're like, tired of this.
I actually always like testing because I like the mechanical side of stuff, so I like to be involved.
Well, you're a
with
wrench,
that
that's
stuff.
why.
He's a wrench.
But so but it's helpful to know the mechanical aspects of things and the cause and effect of various changes and stuff like that.
Well, I think that's important. You bring up a good topic, right? Like, it's not that it's not possible. If you can be a race car driver and be fast and not know the mechanicals of the car, but
it helps.
But you can be probably your driver IQ could be a lot better if you know what's going on, and
Knowing
you
all
can
sides
help the
of it.
crew fix what's going on as opposed to not knowing what's going
Well,
on.
now that I'm old, and I say that proudly, I think that's the
You've earned it.
Yeah. I think that's been the biggest change in racing since I've stopped racing, and now that I interact with his son and that sort of thing. Michael's a very sharp kid and he's a really good driver, but I think drivers of his generation, so much of this stuff is electronic now, and it's all data driven. You know, you give your feedback as to whether or not you like the car, and maybe some of the traits that you don't like about it, and then what you do like about it. But what to do
I like
about
the livery.
That. Yeah.
It's pretty sweet.
Very nice.
But if you think back, you know, and this even predates me, you know, Carlos and I had a mutual friend / mentor, is a guy named Dave White, dynamite guy. And so, you know, back then, when you're doing these long races and stuff like that, the most likely thing that was going to take the car out of the race was a missed shift. And so when you have gone to a sequential gearbox and now you have paddle shift and stuff
Taking
like that,
all of that out of it.
that's gone. You know, you won't do that. You won't flat spotted tires. You've got ABS. You won't spin the car, you know, on acceleration because you've got traction control and that sort of thing. So between those things and the data and those, you know, the mechanical DNFs are you know, few and far between now compared to what they used to be.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's why Scooter and I like to do vintage racing. In fact, next week we're taking off to go for the Daytona Classic.
Yeah.
And we're taking, I think, 5 cars out there.
Don't look at me.
And everything from you know, old cars to, you know, like old RSRs. We're going to be racing 2 of them there. To, you know, brand new Daytona prototypes or GT3R, you know. And what's cool is to be able to jump from one car where you're dealing with the old technology of the manual shift, you know, and now going up to a paddle shift car.
Yeah.
And it's so different. It's amazing. But, you know, it's funny, back in the day when Scooter and I first started, I mean, everything was manual shift. And I've been through, in my generation, the era where, you know, from paddle shift or from manual shift, we go to sequential, and then from there we went to paddle shift. And just that change, you know, to me, it's taken for me as a driver, it's taken the fun out of racing. You know, I think when it was manual shift is when it was the most fun.
Yeah.
And
now it's more kind of like you were saying, back to data. They can see if how but everything is so dialed in now. You're going through tires too fast. You're taking the wrong line too much. You know, it's as
well,
opposed
you look
to
at the
before.
driver data, but you also look at the mechanical data of the car, and so they know, you know, they know what to change on the car to make the car do something differently or better or whatever. And it's taken a lot of that away from the driver. So, you know, guys, I got in right at the end of that, and for, you know, that's really what allowed me to race with Carlos is my technical knowledge and my mechanical knowledge and that sort of thing, to be able to drive a car and develop the car and make the car go faster. That's not really something that you need too much out of a driver anymore. You need a fast guy, but the team, you know, the data guys are really what develop the car and make improvements to the car and that sort of thing. But even, you know, way back before data, think about that. Like, you had to figure out how to go faster on your own. Now everybody
People
looks at
they've got
everybody else.
stopwatches out there, right?
That was all they had.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, you look at data traces and whatnot, and you know, that's how guys that aren't very fast get fast very quickly.
Yeah, the learning curve is a lot quicker.
Which is a good thing. To me, the data has been a huge improvement in the sport, in the sense that, you know, sports car racing is driven by gentleman drivers. You know, it's not big manufacturers coming in. And so, you know, a guy that wants to go out there and race, and, you know, but he's got a 5-day job that he's got to be there every day.
Yeah, he can't spend that much seat time. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, for him to get out in the car is rare, you know, and so to get him up to speed quickly, the data is there for that.
That makes sense. I've heard from a lot of ex-factory drivers that will go unnamed, but they say a lot of them, they got out of it because they were in part of that paddle shift era that, you know, they kind of self-retired themselves. And then their careers were coming to an end anyways, but they can relate to, like, some of what you guys were saying, where it wasn't fun for them anymore. It became it almost felt too computerish.
Right.
Where everything was down to such a fine hair. Not that racing's not that way anyways, but their engagement, I guess. So like you said earlier, Carlos, they didn't feel engaged. They didn't feel like they were winning because they were the ones winning the race. They were just there. They were the pilot at that time.
I think driving these new cars now has gotten to a level where it's just so demanding now that, you know, every little error that you make is a big error. So the kids that are driving these cars now are, they've got to be spot on, and a millisecond is huge.
Yeah.
And it's just totally different. Back in the day, you could make a mistake and still be able to recover from it. Now it's like you make a little tiny mistake.
Yeah.
It's a big mistake.
Yeah, and then I think it goes back to too, like what Scooter was saying, back to data logging. That mistake is also recorded, so it's amplified because it is recorded the way it's recorded, and they can sit when you do post race analysis and you're looking at everything, and you're like, okay, right here. You see what you did right here, and they're like, I don't even remember that because I had some car up my ass. Right. They're like, well, you need to be paying attention, and you're like, okay, I guess. I'm sorry.
I feel like what that means in, let's call it a 30-year period. If you want to be a professional race car driver, what that means then versus now it's a completely different skill set, other than just being able to drive the car fast. You always have to drive the car fast, but all those other things, the car has taken away so many possibilities of driver error for you that's done. You're not, like I said, you're not gonna lock up brakes and flat spot tires and miss gears and blow the engine up and all that sort of stuff. So now it's just really boiled down to just be super, super fast and be super, super consistent. Yeah. And that's it.
Be mistake free. That's it.
You don't really have to do any development. You don't really too much need to, have a whole lot of technical ability. You just got to be lightning fast. And that's why young guys, I don't mean to cut you off, but
go ahead.
That's why this has really turned into a young kid sport, look at F1 now, right? So, so
18, 19-year-old drivers out there.
Right. That experience part, that's not really important anymore,
because like you said, the car, everything's engineered out of the car now.
Right, yeah. So that need for, experience, that I'm not talking about track time experience, but I'm talking about just kind of that.
You got good sim hand-eye coordination, you're going to be good.
Well, it's kind of funny because my son Michael, his senior year of high school, went to Germany to run Carrera Cup there.
Okay.
And the first thing that when he got there is on the sim. They're on the sim every single day testing, and for every new racetrack that they're going to, and then they're going to the racetrack testing there, and then the race. And that's how they're training now, is on the sims. So
you can get an infinite amount of time without any car wear. Yeah. You think about that. It's the dollars they're saving with that too.
And it's funny because I could get on the sim and I'm like, I get nauseous when I drive those things. And the
you're like, I don't like this. You just start smashing the thing. You're just like, get me in the car.
Here, you can see the sim that we have here, and it's I jump into that thing and I get nauseous, and I'm like, I'm not going to learn the track like this. I'm the type that I've got to go to the racetrack, drive it for a couple of laps, then I'll start picking it up, and then maybe by a half day I can get up to speed. These kids can drive on the sim and then go to the racetrack, and they could be up to speed pretty quickly.
Maybe I'm not as old as I thought, because I used the sim right before I went to Dakota this weekend, and it helped me infinitely.
Did it?
Yeah. The first session I ran I was up to speed to where I'd be for the rest of the weekend.
Right.
It helped me a lot just from track
and it does
knowledge.
Help. For certain people, it does. So.
Yeah.
So with that being said, all that racing, and now I think infinitely it's correlated, and I'm sure you guys would agree too, because you do historic racing. Are you going to see, it's already grown a lot over the last decade. Do you think it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger, historic racing, because of
all this automation?
Maybe a lot of people throttling back. Of course, manufacturers are still going to do their things. I just meant from like an interest level, meaning somebody, it says like, I'm going to go do this. Well, maybe I'll just do historic racing instead, because I think that's more fun and more engaging, because I'm not trying to get a seat at Le Mans. I'm not trying to win a seat somewhere. Maybe they're just an enthusiast who has the means to go race historic racing. Do you see more people wanting to do that? Or
it's kind of funny because when I first started racing, you had professional racing, you had SCCA, and then you can go Porsche Club Racing, or you can go HSR, Historic Sports Car Racing. And that was like in the early 90s or up through late 90s. And then around 2000s, to 2010, all these different, race organizations popped up for amateurs.
Yeah.
And now there's so many choices that, you find guys just going, everywhere, you know. And actually, we've seen a decline in vintage racing.
Okay.
But I think it's going to pick up. Will it attract the same people or the same amount of people it had before? I don't know. And it's a shame because for me, the beauty about I love pro racing. But you go to a vintage race and you walk around the paddock and you're seeing all these cool cars that, you grew up watching, racing on the track or you had raced against, and now, there's cars you had raced against in the past. And it's, to me, it's really cool. And I think that experience is, just unbelievable.
Yeah.
But, other people just want to go out and say that they race and,
That's true too. Maybe just a bucket list thing.
Exactly.
Of like, buy a seat to go race in an endurance race somewhere.
So many choices now, so.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that somewhat. I think we're spoiled because some of the big endurance historic racing is here in our backyard. And, like you mentioned earlier, the big one's coming up, the HSR 24 in Daytona, which is a really big one. And it looks like from what we can see, there's a lot of drivers coming that are going to be driving that are big names in the Porsche industry that maybe haven't driven before. So I think that's going to be kind of interesting, some names on the docket. So I think it's going to be a pretty good race. So
that's exciting. Scooter and I have our names now on this list of drivers, which I'm
exactly.
like, what? But
on the list, I saw you guys' name on there.
Yeah, I thought it was funny.
Yeah, it's a good field, I think.
I saw the Bells on there. I saw you guys on there.
We're both pretty good friends with the organizers of HSR, and I think they have record entry this year. They're at over 180 cars for the 24 hour. A lot coming from
Europe too, right?
Yeah, a lot. There's always been a lot of interest in Europe from that race. A lot of people come over here and do it. Great cars.
Yeah, they got like 10 DP cars going to be involved this year too.
The guys that I was just racing with this past weekend in Texas, a lot of them are coming straight. I think 16 of the 32 cars that were there are coming. It's a great event. So stuff like that, I think, we talked a lot about the question that you just asked.
Yeah.
Where will vintage racing go? And I think one of the interesting things about it is that the very first cars I raced in a Pro Series, which was the little IMSA GS Series, and he was racing there as well, was a Cobra R Mustang. And those cars were specialty built cars through Ford that you could buy. They built 250 of them. And it's not a super exciting car, but to vintage race that car now, because we're putting two of them back together, you don't really stop and think about it, but that car's 25 years old now. Yeah. And so
you're dating yourself on now.
Right. But when you
I remember racing that car was a new factory car. Now it's an historic race.
Car is, but it things haven't really changed so much since then. So like when I grew up around vintage racing, because my dad did it, and I remember in going to like Road Atlanta and places like that with him in the mid '80s. And there was a guy with a 917 that I had the slot car, so
you're just huh?
Yeah. There were Can-Am cars and GT40s and there were some really significant cars that would come out to those events there. But there was one guy in particular that had a Gulf 917, and I would just freak out about that car and whatever. And it's
still
funny
freak
to
out
think
about
of
it.
Right.
Yeah.
But in 1985, that car was 15 years old, right?
Yeah.
And you think about how much things changed in those 15 years, and that's what made vintage racing in the 80s really interesting, because the 60s and 70s cars, they were light years different than the 80s cars. Yeah. But now, 90s cars till now, 25 years later, they're not that different. They're not that exciting, really.
Yeah.
So whether that captures the imagination of people enough to continue to develop, that era of car to vintage race it and stuff is hard to say. I just don't know.
I think the interesting dynamic that we're going to see in our lifetime is going to be obviously the electric cars are here, but just the road-going electric cars and how Formula E is involved. And I think a lot of combustion engine, I think a lot of guys like us are going to be rallying towards the historic racing, because that's all we're really going to have left. To have that combustion engine. I think it's going to grow a lot because of that.
Well, the tough part is
He's on a roll.
as we just discussed, how electronic the cars are now to be able to take that to a vintage race and service it and maintain it, and that's the difficulty of that. And we already have that now with, like the DP car has an electronic issue, and you have to bring in a specialist to repair that and diagnose it and that sort of thing. Whereas, the carbureted cars, the 70s cars,
that's why you just keep racing the old IROC cars and just stay there.
Those cars, that's why they keep soldiering on, right? That's the beauty of those cars.
It's like the old Terminator, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? Like the new one comes along, but he still wins.
Well, it's just like the new Porsche 919 that they just raced a couple of years ago. And now those cars are retired, but to go out there and you can't race that vintage car or that car.
Exactly.
You'd have
it's
to
the
have
hybrid.
I'm willing to try
100 people come from Porsche just to be able to
I'm willing to try. I'll give it a shot.
But you couldn't get
he
it
goes,
up.
you put me in the seat and you fund it, I'll do it.
The problem is you can't even get it up and running. I mean, it's just so much involved to get that car up and running that.
Yeah.
That's true. Even this, the 962 I'm sitting next to. Great car. I still need to drive it one more time. But you bought this car in the late 90s, yeah?
2000.
About 2000. Okay, so and when he got this car, I was still the only guy in the shop, and I was tasked with working on this thing. And it's a one-of-one car. And I was calling Porsche Motorsports, and they're
He's like, that's a space shuttle. Sure. What do you want me to do with that thing?
Yeah, we were having to send them parts so that they could identify it and that sort of stuff. And
so sure it's mine.
Yeah, that stuff's really difficult with cars that are more limited, very limited race cars and that sort of thing. You got to be really dedicated to it if you're going to race cars like this, and then the newer cars are very electronic.
I didn't even think about that. That's a great point, though. Even at the vintage race, when you see a car like this out there going, or you see a Kramer car going, you don't think about how the support like how little there are parts if something does fail, because you are technically racing, and things fail. You have to have a good support network or a good machine shop or something.
It's a huge commitment to run those cars. It really is. And that's why it's neat to go to Daytona and see cars like this on track.
Yeah. And you could get in for $30. So anybody who's listening right now and you live in the vicinity, you need to go watch these multi-million-dollar cars run, because there may be a day where you don't get to see them run anymore.
And things come to Daytona that don't go anywhere else. Like that event has already become a big enough deal that he's brought this 962 to Daytona the last few years, and that event in Rennsport is the only place this car goes.
Exactly.
And what a huge privilege! It's like me being a kid and seeing that 917.
That's how
come see this.
That's how I feel. Like that's why it's my favorite race to go to. Any of the HSR races, endurance races I go to, and it blows me away to go there and see so few people. Not like Sebring doesn't draw as much as Daytona, but when I go to Sebring and I see that, and I'm just not that many people there, it kind of blows me away, because I wonder, I'm like, we don't get to see this stuff.
Yeah.
you know?
I mean, I guess it's hard for organizations like HSR to get the word out, and for people to, because there's so many places to go to and so many things to do now. And
I know, I guess maybe because I have a bias and I have such a bit heavy heart with it, because I'm just kind of like, I'm a vintage kind of car guy. So I see that stuff and I'm just like literally like jumping out of my own skin. I'm like, do you know how special that is? Do you know how special that is?
Yeah.
Like, when's the next time you're going to hear a 4-rotor car that Mazda that ran at Le Mans out here wide open throttle? You're not. You're not going to hear it. And unless you live during that area where that car raced for that season and you saw that, and you come to this, you're never going to see that.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I get so fired up about it, because him and I'm sitting there like, I probably sound like a broken record. I keep saying them over and over again. I was like, why is there no one here?
No, I'm about 100 yards down the way just screaming the same thing. Like, you realize that's a one-of-one car. Yeah, same thing.
So get out there, support HSR, guys. Get out there, especially if you live in the state of Florida. You want to see some good racing and special cars. You can go to that one track and pretty much see all of the special cars that are from all around the world, probably in that one vicinity for pennies on the dollar.
At night, in the rain.
Yeah. You have to get invited to go see some of these collections. It's like, oh my God, you have a Lowenbrow, da-da-da. It's like, well, if you come to that race, you're probably going to see it.
And it's a 24-hour race that they're doing. So it's called the Classic 24. So they're going to run all night Saturday night through the morning on Sunday. And they break them up in different groups. So, you know, a group of cars will run for an hour, and then next group will go out. And So it'll be pretty cool. It's
Yeah.
a great event. And then we've got Sebring coming up first weekend in December.
Yep.
And that's
Right
also
around
what
the
they call
corner too.
Classic
Yeah,
Sebring. And
that's going to be great. We'll be there for that too. So, well, thank you guys so much. We tied up about an hour of your time. Thank you guys for spending time with us and inviting us and spending this. It's just a joy to come and talk to enthusiasts that kind of just love the sport and love everything about it. And it's nice to talk to you guys. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right. We'll see you guys in the next one.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of PCAR Talk. Connect with us on Instagram at PCAR Talk or online at pcartalk.com.